a night that changed everything. Crystal chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars above the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. Carolyn Brooks pushed her cleaning cart along the marble corridor, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. The annual Tech Industry Gala was in full swing, and she had been assigned to maintain the private hallways where the wealthiest guests retreated for quiet conversations away from the crowd. She adjusted her navy blue maintenance uniform and tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. 5 years ago, she would have attended an event like this as a guest, dressed in an elegant gown, discussing rehabilitation techniques with fellow physical therapists. But life had taken unexpected turns. After her husband passed away in a construction accident, Caroline's world collapsed. Medical bills piled up, her small practice failed, and she found herself taking whatever work she could find to provide for her daughter. The encounter as Carolyn approached the private lounge area. She heard voices behind the heavy oak door. One voice was cold and dismissive, while another sounded strained with frustration. She knocked gently before entering with her supplies. Inside the lavishly decorated room sat a man in an expensive wheelchair, his tailored charcoal suit fitting perfectly on his athletic frame. His dark hair was styled impeccably, and his sharp green eyes held a look of controlled anger. This was Jameson Reed, the tech billionaire whose face appeared regularly in business magazines. Across from him stood a woman in a designer dress, clearly uncomfortable with whatever conversation had been taking place. "I'll be quick," Carolyn said quietly. Beginning to empty the waste baskets near the window, the woman excused herself quickly. Leaving Caroline alone with Jameson, he stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the San Francisco skyline, his jaw clenched tight. Caroline continued her work, but something caught her attention. As Jameson shifted his weight in frustration, his left foot moved slightly, almost imperceptibly. Carolyn paused. Years of training kicked in despite herself? That wasn't a passive movement. That was a genuine muscle response. "Can I help you with something?" Jameson's voice cut through the silence, sharp and irritated. "You've been staring?" Carolyn straightened up, meeting his gaze directly. "Your foot moved when you adjusted your position. Excuse me?" His eyes narrowed dangerously. "I saw it. That wasn't a spasm. That was voluntary movement." Carolyn took a step closer, her professional instincts overriding her position as cleaning staff. "How long have you been in that chair? Who do you think you are?" Jameson's voice rose slightly. "You're a janitor, not a doctor." "I was a physical therapist," Caroline replied calmly. "Before circumstances changed my path, and I know what I saw." The bold promise Jameson laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound was bitter and hollow. "I've seen every specialist in the country. Neurologists, orthopedic surgeons, rehabilitation experts. They all say the same thing. The injury damaged something they can't fix. I should be grateful I'm alive. But they never found structural damage, did they?" Caroline asked, reading the truth in his expression. "No spinal cord lesion, no permanent nerve damage, just a body that stopped responding." His face paled slightly. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've seen it before," she said softly. "Sometimes trauma locks the body down as a protection mechanism. The mind tells the body it's safer not to move. It's rare, but it happens." "That's ridiculous," Jameson scoffed. But his hands gripped the armrests tighter. Carolyn pulled a small notepad from her pocket and wrote down her phone number. She placed it on the table beside him. "I can help you walk again." The silence that followed was deafening. Jameson stared at the paper as if it might explode. "And what do you want in return?" he finally asked, his voice dripping with suspicion. "Money? A story to sell to the press?" "Nothing," Caroline replied simply. "I lost someone I loved, and I couldn't save him. But maybe I can help you save yourself." "This is insane," Jameson muttered, but his hand moved toward the paper. "Why would you risk your job making wild promises to someone you don't know?" Caroline met his eyes steadily. "Because 3 years ago, my daughter stopped talking after her father died. Every doctor said there was nothing physically wrong. They suggested therapy, medications, time, but I knew better. I knew she was trapped inside her grief, just like I was. What happened? Jameson asked, despite himself. I promised her that I would find my voice again if she found hers. I started singing to her every night, even though I could barely get through a verse without crying. Slowly, she started humming along. Then one day she sang with me, and then she spoke. Caroline's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Sometimes we need someone to believe in us before we can believe in ourselves. Jameson looked away, his jaw working as he processed her words. And if you're wrong? If this is just false hope, then we'll deal with that together, Caroline said. But what if I'm right? The decision after Caroline left, Jameson sat alone in the quiet room, staring at the phone number. His mind raced through the past 3 years since the accident. He had been celebrating a major business deal, standing on the balcony of his penthouse, when Trevor Ashford, his business partner and closest friend, delivered devastating news. Trevor had been secretly selling company secrets to competitors, orchestrating a hostile takeover. The shock and betrayal hit Jameson so hard that he stepped backward without thinking. Tumbling over the railing, he fell 2 stories onto a decorative awning before crashing to the ground. The physical injuries healed within months, but his legs never responded again. Every test came back negative for permanent damage. The doctors were baffled. Jameson eventually stopped trying to understand it. Trevor disappeared with millions. Leaving Jameson alone in his massive mansion with nothing but his wheelchair and his rage, the company survived, but Jameson became a recluse, running his empire from behind closed doors and computer screens. Now this janitor, this stranger, claimed she could help him walk. It was absurd, impossible. Yet something about her steady confidence made him want to believe. Caroline's. Whirled across the city in a small apartment in the Mission District, Caroline arrived home past midnight. Mia was asleep on the couch, her babysitter reading quietly in the corner. After paying the sitter, Caroline checked on her daughter, smoothing the dark curls away from her peaceful face. Did you meet any interesting people tonight, Mom? Mia's sleepy voice surprised her. I thought you were asleep, sweetheart. Almost Mia yawned, but I wanted to wait up. Tell me a story. Caroline sat on the edge of the couch. I met someone tonight who reminds me of you after Daddy died. Sad and quiet. Mia asked perceptively. Stuck Caroline corrected gently. Like he forgot how to hope. Did you tell him about me? Mia sat up, suddenly more alert. I did. I told him how brave you are. Mia hugged her mother tight. Are you going to help him like you helped me? I'm going to try, Caroline whispered. If he lets me, he will, Mia said, with the certainty only children possess. Because you don't give up on people. The phone call for days passed before Caroline's phone rang with an unknown number. She was folding laundry in her tiny kitchen when she answered. This is Jameson Reed. The voice was formal, controlled. We met at the Fairmont. Caroline's heart skipped. I want to be clear about something, Jameson continued. I don't believe in miracles or false hope, but I also can't forget what you said. About seeing my foot move. About the mind locking down the body. I understand, Caroline replied carefully. If we do this, there are conditions. His voice hardened. Complete discretion. No press, no social media, no discussion with anyone about what we're attempting. If this fails, I don't want the humiliation of the world knowing I tried and couldn't succeed. Agreed, Caroline said without hesitation. And I pay you, Jameson added firmly. This isn't charity. If you're providing a service, you'll be compensated fairly. Caroline wanted to refuse, but she thought of Mia's worn school clothes and the overdue rent notice on her counter. That's acceptable. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. My home address will be sent to your phone. Jameson paused. And Caroline, don't make me regret this. I won't, she promised. See you tomorrow, Jameson. Preparation the next day moved slowly for Caroline. She requested time off from her cleaning job, telling her supervisor she had a private client for therapy work. It wasn't entirely a lie. She dug through boxes in her closet until she found her old physical therapy equipment, resistance bands. small weights, a goniometer for measuring joint angles. In her worn leather journal, where she had documented cases during her practice, Mia watched with curiosity. As Caroline laid everything out on the kitchen table, "Is this for the stuck man?" "Yes, baby. I'm going to try to help him remember how to move. Like when you taught me to ride my bike after I was scared," Mia asked. Caroline smiled at the memory. Mia had fallen hard during her first attempt and refused to try again for months. Caroline had patiently worked with her, starting with just sitting on the bike, then balancing, then finally pedaling. Exactly like that. Sometimes we have to take very small steps before we can take big ones. "Will you bring me sometime?" Mia asked hopefully. "I want to meet him, maybe," Caroline said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "If he's comfortable with it?" That evening, as Caroline rode the bus toward the exclusive Pacific Heights neighborhood, she reviewed everything she remembered about psychogenic paralysis and trauma-induced mobility disorders. The cases were rare, but documented. The mind could absolutely override the body's capabilities when protecting itself from perceived threats. Entering a new world, Jameson's mansion took her breath away. The modern glass and steel structure overlooked the bay, with terrace gardens cascading down the hillside. A security guard met her at the gate, checked her identification, escorted her to the main entrance. Inside, the home was a study in minimalist luxury. Clean lines, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything was perfectly arranged and utterly impersonal. It felt more like a museum than a home. Jameson waited in a spacious living room, positioned near the windows. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans, and a gray sweater. But his posture was rigid with tension. "He came," he said, as if surprised. "I gave you my word," Caroline replied, setting down her bag of equipment. "Most people's words don't mean much," Jameson observed cynically. "Mine do." Caroline began unpacking her supplies. "Before we start, I need to understand your medical history completely. Every test, every diagnosis, every doctor's opinion." For the next hour, Jameson recounted 3 years of medical consultations. Caroline listened carefully, taking notes. As he spoke, she watched his body language, noting how his hands clenched when discussing the accident, how his breathing changed when mentioning Trevor's betrayal. "The fall should have killed me," Jameson admitted quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if part of me did die that night. The part that trusted people. The part that believed in anything beyond money and power." "Trust can be rebuilt," Caroline said gently. "Just like mobility, can it?" Jameson's voice was heavy with doubt. "Trevor was my best friend since college. We built the company together from nothing. I trusted him with everything, and he destroyed me without hesitation. If I couldn't see that betrayal coming, how can I ever trust my judgment again?" Caroline set down her pen and looked at him directly. "By starting small? Trust me to try this therapy? Trust yourself to show up and do the work. Trust that maybe, just maybe, your body is waiting for permission to heal." The first session begins. Jameson studied her for a long moment. In Caroline, he saw none of the pity or false enthusiasm he had encountered from other therapists. She looked at him like he was a puzzle to solve, not a tragedy to mourn. "Where do we start?" he asked finally. With awareness, Caroline said. She pulled out a yoga mat and spread it on the floor. "I'm going to help you transfer to the mat, and then we're going to do something very simple. We're going to breathe and pay attention to every sensation in your body." "I don't feel anything in my legs," Jameson reminded her. "You might be surprised," Caroline replied. "The body remembers more than we realize. We just have to listen carefully." With careful assistance, Jameson transferred from his wheelchair to the mat. Caroline sat beside him, her voice calm and steady as she guided him through a body scan meditation. "Notice your breath. Feel how it moves through your chest. Follow it down through your abdomen. Don't try to change anything. Just notice." Jameson closed his eyes, fighting his natural skepticism. But as minutes passed, something strange happened. He began to notice subtle sensations he had trained himself to ignore. A faint tingling, a distant warmth. Nothing dramatic, but undeniably present. "There's something," he whispered, afraid to speak louder and break whatever fragile connection he was feeling. It's faint, but I feel something. Carolyn smiled. That's your starting point. That awareness is the first step to reconnection. Your nervous system is functioning. We just need to rebuild the bridge between your intention and your movement. When the session ended 90 minutes later, Jameson felt exhausted in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Not physically tired, but emotionally drained. Carolyn helped him back into his wheelchair. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Jameson nodded slowly. Carolyn? Thank you for not treating me like I'm broken. You're not broken, she said firmly. You're healing. There's a difference. As Caroline left the mansion, Jameson sat alone in the gathering darkness, staring at his legs. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself the dangerous luxury of hope, small victories and hidden fears. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Jameson's home gym, a space he hadn't entered in over 2 years. Carolyn arrived to find him already there, positioned near the specialized equipment that had gathered dust since his accident. His expression was guarded, but there was something different in his eyes today. A flicker of cautious determination. I couldn't sleep last night, Jameson admitted, as Caroline set down her therapy bag. I kept thinking about what I felt yesterday, the tingling. I tried to recreate it on my own, but nothing happened. That's completely normal, Carolyn assured him, pulling out resistance bands and foam rollers. Your nervous system is relearning patterns it shut down for protection. It won't respond to force or impatience. We have to coax it gently, consistently. She knelt beside his wheelchair, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Today we're going to try something different. I want you to visualize movement before attempting it. The brain can't always distinguish between vividly imagined movement and actual movement. Elite athletes use this technique all the time. Jameson raised an eyebrow skeptically. You want me to imagine walking? And somehow, my legs will remember? Not exactly, Caroline explained, helping him transfer to the padded therapy table. I want you to close your eyes and remember what it felt like to walk. Not just the mechanics, but the sensation. The weight shifting from heel to toe, the subtle balance adjustments, the rhythm of your stride. As Jameson closed his eyes, Caroline gently placed her hands on his left ankle, applying subtle pressure to stimulate neural pathways. Tell me about a walk you remember vividly. Before the accident? Memories and movement. Jameson's face tightened at first, resistant to revisiting the past. But gradually, his features softened as a memory surfaced. There was a trail near Stanford, back when Trevor and I were in graduate school. We used to walk it every Sunday morning, planning our future company. Talking about changing the world with technology. His voice grew distant, lost in the recollection. I remember this one morning in October. The leaves were turning colors, and there was this crisp feeling in the air. We must have walked 5 miles, solving problems and dreaming big. I felt invincible that day, like nothing could stop us. As he spoke, Caroline noticed his toes flexing slightly. She kept her voice calm, not wanting to break his concentration. What did the ground feel like under your feet? Uneven. The trail was covered with fallen leaves, so you had to pay attention to your footing. There were tree roots, breaking through in places. Jameson's brow furrowed in concentration. I can almost feel it. The way your calves work differently on uneven terrain. The constant micro-adjustments. Excellent, Caroline murmured. Stay with that feeling. Don't force anything. Just remember, for 20 minutes, they worked through the visualization while Caroline provided gentle manual therapy, stimulating specific muscle groups and nerve pathways. When Jameson finally opened his eyes, he looked drained but energized simultaneously. My legs feel warm, he said, wonder creeping into his voice. Actually warm. I haven't felt that in forever. Increased circulation, Carolyn explained. Your body is responding to the neural signals, even if the movement isn't visible yet. This is real progress, Jameson. The weight of the past over the following 2 weeks, Carolyn came to the mansion every evening. Each session built upon the previous one, gradually increasing the complexity of exercises. Jameson progressed from visualization to assisted leg lifts, from passive stretching to active resistance training. The movements were minimal, often invisible to an untrained eye, But Caroline's experienced gaze caught every microscopic improvement. During their sessions, the conversation inevitably drifted beyond therapy. Caroline learned that Jameson had built his technology empire, developing software that helped hospitals coordinate patient care more efficiently. His work had saved countless lives by reducing medical errors and streamlining emergency responses. "I wanted to make a difference," Jameson confessed one evening, exhausted after attempting to hold his leg in an extended position for 10 seconds. "My mother died from a preventable medical error when I was in college. A pharmacy mixed up medications. Such a simple, stupid mistake that cost her everything." Caroline paused in recording his progress. "I'm so sorry. Trevor was there for me through all of it. Helped me channel my grief into something productive. We built the company together, donated millions to patient safety initiatives. I thought we shared the same values. Turns out he only shared my bank account. What happened the night you fell?" Caroline asked gently, sensing they had reached a crucial moment. Jameson was quiet for so long that Caroline thought he might refuse to answer. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were celebrating closing a deal with a major hospital network. Trevor asked to speak privately. We went out to the balcony of my penthouse. He told me he had been approached by our biggest competitor with an offer to sell them our proprietary algorithms and client lists. And he had already accepted." The words tumbled out faster now, years of suppressed emotion breaking through. He said it so casually, like discussing the weather. "Told me I would thank him eventually because the buyout would make us both incredibly wealthy. When I refused and threatened to expose him, he just laughed. Said I was too naive for the business world. That loyalty was a weakness he had outgrown." The moment everything changed, Carolyn listened without interrupting as Jameson continued. "I was so shocked, so devastated that I stepped backward without thinking. My heel caught on the balcony railing and I fell, 2 stories down. Trevor didn't even call for help immediately. Security footage showed him standing there for almost 30 seconds, just watching before finally making a call. He left you there," Carolyn said softly, understanding flooding through her. "Worse, he visited me once in the hospital. 2 days after the accident. Brought expensive flowers and spoke loudly about how tragic it was, how he would help manage the company during my recovery. All performance for the nurses and doctors." Jameson's hands trembled, but when we were alone for just a moment, he leaned close and whispered that maybe this was karma for me being so stubborn. That my paralysis was a gift because now I couldn't interfere with his plans. "Jameson," Caroline breathed, horror and compassion mixing in her expression. "The police couldn't prove anything. Trevor had covered his tracks perfectly. The business deal went through before I could stop it. By the time I was released from the hospital, he had vanished with his portion of the profits. I got lawyers involved, but he had structured everything legally enough that prosecution was impossible. I was left with my company, my money, and legs that refused to work despite every doctor saying they should." Carolyn moved closer, her voice fierce. "Your body protected you the only way it knew how. It shut down because the trauma was too overwhelming to process. The betrayal, the fall, the humiliation. It was too much. So your nervous system hit an emergency stop. For 3 years, Jameson said bitterly. For 3 years you survived," Caroline corrected. "And now you're ready to do more than survive. You're ready to heal." An unexpected visitor the next evening, Caroline brought Mia to the session. She had cleared it with Jameson first, explaining that her regular babysitter was unavailable. Jameson agreed with surprising ease. Curious about the daughter Caroline spoke of so often, Mia entered the mansion with wide eyes, taking in the soaring ceilings and expensive artwork. But when she saw Jameson, she walked directly to him without hesitation. Extending her small hand, "Hi, I'm Mia. My mom says you're working really hard to remember how to walk." Jameson shook her hand solemnly, charmed, despite himself, by her directness. "I am. It's difficult." "I know," Mia said with the wisdom of someone far older. "After my daddy died, I forgot how to talk for a while. Not because my throat didn't work, but because my heart was too sad to find words." Jameson glanced at Caroline, who nodded encouragingly. He looked back at Mia. What helped you remember? Mom sang to me every night. Even when she was crying, she kept singing. She showed me it was okay to be sad and still make beautiful sounds. So I started humming with her, then singing, then talking again. Mia smiled. Sometimes you have to make small noises before you can make big ones. Oh, shh. The simple profoundness of her statement struck Jameson silent. This 8-year-old child understood trauma and recovery in a way most adults never would. During the therapy session, Mia sat quietly in the corner, coloring in a notebook she had brought. But every time Jameson achieved something, even lifting his foot a single inch off the table, she would look up and give him an enthusiastic thumbs up. Her unrestrained belief in his progress was infectious. You moved your whole leg that time, Mia observed, during a particularly successful repetition. Like my bike pedal. Small circles get bigger the more you practice. Jameson found himself smiling genuinely for the first time in recent memory. You're right. Small circles becoming bigger ones. The breakthrough, 3 weeks into therapy, the breakthrough came unexpectedly. Caroline had Jameson on the mat, working through resistance exercises with bands around his ankles. Mia was reading aloud from a children's book in the corner, her voice providing a soothing soundtrack. Now I want you to try something we haven't attempted yet, Caroline said, positioning herself to provide support. I want you to think about standing. Not forcing it, just holding the intention while your muscles do what they remember. Jameson gripped the parallel bars Caroline had set up, his arms taking most of his weight. Caroline placed her hands on his hips, ready to stabilize him. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Jameson pushed with his arms, and something miraculous happened. His legs engaged. Not fully, not perfectly, but they bore a portion of his weight for nearly 5 seconds before trembling and giving out. Caroline guided him safely back to his wheelchair, her face radiant with excitement. Ch, you did it. Jameson, you actually supported weight on your legs. Mia dropped her book and rushed over, clapping her hands. You stood up. I saw it. Jameson sat motionless, staring at his legs as if they belonged to someone else. His chest heaved with emotion he couldn't quite name. Right. I actually felt my legs working. This is the turning point, Caroline said, kneeling beside him. Your nervous system just proved it remembers. Now we build on this. Strength, endurance, coordination. It won't be quick, but it's possible. You're going to walk again, Jameson? For the first time since his accident, tears ran down Jameson's face. Not tears of despair or frustration, but of hope. Pure, terrifying, exhilarating hope. Facing the skeptic's word of Jameson's progress somehow leaked to the media. Perhaps a household staff member mentioned it. Or maybe someone at his company noticed his improved demeanor during video conferences. Regardless of the source, within days. Tabloid headlines screamed speculation about miracle cures and fraudulent disability claims. The backlash was brutal. Social media exploded with cynics suggesting Jameson had faked his paralysis for sympathy or financial advantage. Former business associates gave interviews questioning the legitimacy of his condition. Even medical professionals who had never examined him offered skeptical opinions to any reporter who asked. Caroline arrived one evening to find Jameson in his study. Surrounded by printed articles and laptop screens displaying hateful comments, his face was hard, the softness they had been cultivating together replaced by familiar walls. They think I'm a liar, he said flatly. A fraud using tragedy for personal gain. Everything we've accomplished means nothing to them. Since when do you care what strangers think? Caroline challenged, closing his laptop firmly. Since their opinions could destroy what's left of my reputation, Jameson snapped. I've worked my entire adult life building something meaningful. Now they want to tear it down because I dared to try recovery. Caroline pulled up a chair, her expression stern. Let me tell you what I see. I see a man who had every reason to give up but chose to fight instead. I see someone who faces excruciating physical and emotional work every single day without quitting. I see courage that most people will never understand because they've never been tested the way you have. Pretty words. Jameson muttered, but his anger was deflating. Not words. Truth. Caroline leaned forward. The people criticizing you are afraid. They're afraid that if you can overcome something this devastating, they have no excuse for their own limitations. Your healing threatens their comfortable narratives about what's possible, so they attack. That's their problem, not yours. Mia, who had been waiting in the hallway, peeked her head in. "Mr. Reed, can I tell you something my teacher said?" Jameson nodded, grateful for the interruption. "She said that crabs in a bucket will pull down any crab trying to climb out. Not because they're mean, but because they don't understand there's a world outside the bucket." Mia walked closer. "You're climbing out of the bucket. The other crabs don't matter." Jameson stared at this wise child, then looked at her mother, then down at his own hands. Slowly, deliberately, he gathered the printed articles and dropped them in the wastebasket beside his desk. "You're right, both of you. The only opinion that matters is my own." He met Caroline's eyes. "Let's keep working. I want to walk into my next board meeting. You're building strength and trust." The sessions intensified. Caroline created a comprehensive program combining physical therapy, visualization techniques, and gradual strength building. Jameson threw himself into the work with single-minded determination. Every morning began with stretching and neural activation exercises. Afternoons included strength training and balance work. Evenings brought the most challenging attempts at bearing full weight and taking assisted steps. Progress was inconsistent. Some days Jameson could stand for 30 seconds. Other days, his legs refused to cooperate, leaving him frustrated and exhausted. But Caroline remained steadfast, adjusting the program as needed and celebrating every tiny victory. "Recovery isn't linear," she reminded him during a particularly difficult session. "Your body is rewriting 3 years of learned helplessness. That takes time and patience." During their work together, an unexpected friendship developed. Life beyond therapy. She told him about her late husband, a carpenter who had loved building things with his hands, about the financial devastation his death had caused, about the difficult choice to close her therapy practice and take whatever work would pay the bills. "You're overqualified to be cleaning buildings," Jameson observed one evening. "And I'm providing for my daughter," Carolyn replied with quiet dignity. "There's no shame in honest work, regardless of the title." "I didn't mean it that way," Jameson said quickly. "I meant you have extraordinary skills that could help so many people. Have you considered reopening your practice?" Caroline was quiet for a moment, adjusting the resistance band around his ankle. "I think about it sometimes. But starting over requires capital I don't have. Equipment, space, licensing fees, marketing. The barriers feel insurmountable. What if they weren't?" Jameson asked carefully. "What if you had backing from someone who believes in your work?" Caroline met his eyes, understanding dawning. "Jameson, I'm not helping you for financial gain. Know that, which is exactly why I want to help you." He reached out and gently stilled her hands. "Let me invest in your future the way you've invested in mine. When I walk again, I want it to be the beginning of both our new chapters, not just mine." The day everything changed 8 weeks after their first session. Jameson stood in his home gym, gripping the parallel bars so tightly his knuckles turned white. Caroline stood 3 feet away, her arms extended but not touching him. Mia sat cross-legged on a yoga mat, humming softly to herself. "I'm going to let go of the bars," Jameson announced, his voice steady, despite the fear in his eyes. "Are you sure you're ready?" Caroline asked, though she already knew the answer. She had watched his strength multiply over the past weeks. His balance had improved dramatically. His confidence had grown alongside his physical capabilities, Jameson admitted with a slight smile. "But I'm doing it anyway." He took a deep breath, released his right hand from the bar, then his left. For 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, he stood completely unsupported. His legs trembled with effort, his core engaged to maintain balance. Caroline watched with professional assessment and personal pride as he remained upright for 10 full seconds before grabbing the bars again. "I stood alone," he whispered, almost disbelieving. "Without support, I actually did it." Mia jumped up, abandoning her humming. "That was amazing. Do it again." "Not yet," Caroline laughed, moving closer to provide stability as Jameson's legs began shaking from exhaustion. "We don't want to overdo it." But yes, that was incredible. Jameson allowed Caroline to help him to his wheelchair, but his face glowed with accomplishment. I need to show the world I'm not a fraud. I want to make a public appearance. Caroline's smile faded slightly. Are you certain? The scrutiny will be intense. People will analyze every movement, every wobble. They'll look for reasons to doubt. Let them look, Jameson said firmly. I spent 3 years hiding from the world, letting fear and bitterness control me. Trevor took enough from me. I won't let him steal my future too. He's planning the revelation over the next 2 weeks. Jameson's team organized a press conference under the guise of a company announcement. Only his closest advisors knew the true purpose. Meanwhile, Caroline pushed Jameson harder than ever, preparing him for the physical and mental demands of walking in public. They practiced in the mansion's grand hallway, gradually increasing the distance Jameson could walk with just a cane for support. From 10 feet to 20, 20 to 50. His gait wasn't perfect. He still relied heavily on the cane, and his steps were careful and deliberate. But he was undeniably walking. Remember, Caroline coached during their final practice session. This isn't about proving anything to strangers. This is about reclaiming your life on your terms. Whatever happens out there, you've already won. The night before the press conference, Jameson couldn't sleep. He found himself in the study, staring at a photograph from 5 years earlier. In it, he and Trevor stood together at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at the camera. Brothers, in all but blood, or so he had believed. You're up late. Caroline's voice came from the doorway. She had stayed at the mansion in the guest quarters, wanting to be available for last-minute preparation. Thinking about tomorrow, Jameson admitted. Wondering if I'm ready. Caroline entered and sat across from him. Can I tell you something? When my husband died, I was paralyzed in a different way. I couldn't imagine a future without him. Couldn't see past my grief to anything else. I went through the motions for Mia's sake, but inside I was completely stuck. What changed? Jameson asked. Mia asked me one day if I thought Daddy would be sad seeing us so sad all the time. She was only 5, but she understood something I didn't. Grief was natural, but staying buried in it wasn't honoring his memory. Living fully, loving completely, finding joy again, that was the real tribute. Caroline's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You've been paralyzed by betrayal the way I was paralyzed by loss? Tomorrow isn't about walking. It's about choosing to live again. Jameson absorbed her words in silence. Then, slowly, he reached across and took her hand. Thank you. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For believing when I had given up. For walking this journey beside me. It's what we do for the people we care about, Caroline said softly. Squeezing his hand in return, the press conference, the hotel conference room, was packed with journalists, cameras, and curious onlookers. Jameson's company had promised a significant announcement, and speculation ran wild. Some expected a new product launch. Others anticipated a merger. No one predicted what they were about to witness. Backstage, Jameson adjusted his tie with shaking hands. He wore a charcoal suit tailored to accommodate easier movement. Dress shoes chosen for their supportive soles rather than style. His cane, a sleek design in carbon fiber, leaned against his wheelchair. Caroline crouched beside him, her hand resting on his arm. Just like we practiced. Steady breaths. Trust your body. Mia, who had convinced her mother to let her come, squeezed his other hand. Remember, you're climbing out of the bucket. The other crabs don't matter. Jameson laughed, genuine and free. How did an 8-year-old get so wise? Good mom, Mia said simply, making both adults smile. The moderator's voice called Jameson's name. This was it. The moment that would define his narrative going forward. He could roll onto that stage in his wheelchair, safe and expected. Or he could show the world what determination and courage could accomplish. Jameson stood, gripping his cane. Carolyn and Mia stayed just out of sight in the wings, their presence a silent support. He took one step forward, then another. The backstage area fell silent as staff members realized what they were witnessing. Walking into light when Jameson emerged onto the stage, walking. The conference room erupted. Gasps, exclamations. the sudden flurry of camera shutters capturing the impossible. He moved slowly, deliberately, his cane bearing some of his weight. But his legs carrying him forward step by step, the walk to the podium felt both eternal and instant. When he finally reached it, gripping the edge for support, the room exploded in applause. Many people were openly crying. Journalists who came expecting a business story found themselves witnessing a testament to human resilience. Jameson waited for the noise to subside before speaking into the microphone. 3 years ago, I fell from a balcony during one of the darkest moments of my life. The physical injuries healed, but I remained paralyzed. Every doctor told me there was no medical reason I couldn't walk. They were right. The injury wasn't in my spine. It was in my spirit. The room was utterly silent now, hanging on every word. I was betrayed by someone I trusted completely. Someone I called brother. That betrayal shattered something inside me so profoundly that my body simply stopped working. I couldn't process the trauma, so my nervous system shut down as protection. Jameson's voice grew stronger as he spoke. For 3 years, I believed I was broken beyond repair. I isolated myself, built walls, and convinced myself that staying in that wheelchair was safer than risking further pain. He paused, searching the wings until his eyes found Caroline. Then I met someone who refused to accept my story, a woman who saw potential where I saw impossibility, who promised she could help me walk again, asking nothing in return. Her name is Caroline Brooks, and she saved my life. Caroline stepped onto the stage at Jameson's gesture, Mia holding her hand tightly. The applause swelled again as Carolyn joined him at the podium, her cheeks flushed with emotion. Carolyn is a physical therapist who lost everything when her husband died unexpectedly, Jameson continued. She was working as a janitor to provide for her daughter when she promised me something impossible. And then she delivered. He turned to face her directly. You gave me back more than mobility. You gave me back hope, purpose, the courage to trust again. The announcement which brings me to today's actual announcement, Jameson said, addressing the crowd again. I'm establishing the Brooks Rehabilitation Center, a comprehensive facility dedicated to treating trauma-induced paralysis and other psychogenic disorders. It will be fully funded by my foundation and directed by Caroline Brooks. Caroline's hand flew to her mouth, shock and joy flooding her features. This was beyond anything they had discussed. Not just backing for a small practice, but an entire center bearing her name. Will provide treatment regardless of patients' ability to pay, Jameson continued. Because everyone deserves someone who believes in them the way Caroline believed in me, everyone deserves a second chance to reclaim their life. The press conference descended into controlled chaos as journalists shouted questions. How long had he been in therapy? What were the specifics of his treatment? Would he resume full control of his company? Jameson answered each question patiently, honestly, sharing his journey with the same vulnerability he had shown Carolyn. When asked about Trevor Ashford, Jameson's expression grew serious. Trevor taught me a painful lesson about trust. But Caroline and her daughter taught me that one person's cruelty doesn't define humanity. For every betrayal, there are a dozen acts of kindness. I choose to focus on building the latter. A new beginning after the press conference, away from the cameras and crowds. Jameson sat in a quiet hotel suite with Carolyn and Mia. His legs ached from the exertion, but it was the good ache of muscles properly used, not the phantom pain of atrophy. He didn't have to do all this, Carolyn said. Still processing the enormity of his announcement. A rehabilitation center? That's millions of dollars, years of planning. I have the resources, and you have the vision, Jameson replied. Together, we can help people who fall through the cracks of traditional medicine. People whose injuries are real but invisible, who are told their paralysis is all in their head, as if that makes it less legitimate. Mia tugged on his sleeve. Can I work at the center too? I'm good at cheering people up. Jameson smiled down at her. When you're older? Absolutely. We'll need someone who understands that healing isn't just physical. It's emotional, spiritual, and sometimes it requires the wisdom of someone who colors pictures while others work. I can do that, Mia agreed seriously. Over the following months, the story of Jameson's recovery spread worldwide. Some skeptics remained, always questioning, always doubting. But far more people were inspired. Letters poured in from individuals with similar conditions, from families caring for loved ones with unexplained paralysis, from medical professionals seeking to understand this intersection of body and mind, building something beautiful. The Brooks Rehabilitation Center broke ground 6 months after the press conference. Jameson insisted Caroline design every aspect according to her vision. The facility featured state-of-the-art equipment alongside quiet meditation rooms. Physical therapy spaces opened onto healing gardens. Private rooms ensured dignity while communal areas fostered connection and shared experience. Throughout construction, Jameson and Caroline's relationship deepened beyond patient and therapist, beyond benefactor and recipient. They became true partners, united by shared purpose and mutual respect. Jameson taught Caroline about business management and strategic planning. Caroline taught Jameson about patience, emotional intelligence, and the courage to remain vulnerable. "I never asked," Jameson said one evening as they reviewed architectural plans together. "Why did you really approach me that night?" "The truth?" Caroline set down her pen, considering her answer carefully. "Because I saw myself in you. I saw someone who had given up, but didn't want to. Someone who needed permission to hope again. And because after my husband died, people were so kind to me. Strangers brought meals, paid bills, watched Mia when I couldn't function. I never got to repay that kindness directly, but I could pay it forward." It was never about the walking, Jameson realized. Not really. Walking was just the visible part, Caroline agreed. The real healing was learning that devastating loss doesn't have to mean permanent defeat. That betrayal by one person doesn't poison all relationships. That our bodies and spirits are more resilient than we imagine if we give them the chance to recover. The grand opening, 1 year after Jameson's press conference, the Brooks Rehabilitation Center opened its doors. The celebration was deliberately intimate, focusing on the first patients rather than wealthy donors or politicians. Jameson walked through the facility without his cane, though he kept it nearby for longer distances. His gait was natural now, the trembling and uncertainty replaced by confident strides. Caroline, now director of the center, gave a speech that brought tears to many eyes. "This place exists because one man had the courage to admit he needed help and the wisdom to accept it when offered. But more than that, it exists because countless people contributed their stories, their expertise, and their belief that healing is possible even when traditional medicine says it isn't." Mia, now 9 years old, cut the ceremonial ribbon alongside Jameson and her mother. She wore a dress she had chosen herself, bright yellow like sunshine, and her smile was radiant. The first patient admitted was a young veteran named Brian who had been paralyzed after witnessing an attack that killed his entire unit. Like Jameson, extensive testing showed no permanent physical damage, yet he couldn't walk. The military had discharged him, insurance stopped covering treatment, and he had spent 2 years in a wheelchair. Believing he would never recover, Carolyn personally welcomed him. Sitting beside his wheelchair in the garden courtyard, "I want you to know something important. Your paralysis is real. The fact that it originated from psychological trauma doesn't make it less legitimate or less challenging. We're going to work together to help your mind and body reconnect at whatever pace feels right for you." Brian's eyes filled with tears. "Everyone keeps saying, it's all in my head, like I'm making it up for attention." "It is in your head," Caroline said gently. "And in your nervous system, your muscles, your entire being. Trauma affects every part of us. Healing has to address every part too. That's what we do here." Full circle 2 years after their first meeting, Jameson hosted a small dinner party at his mansion. The guest list included Carolyn and Mia, of course, along with key staff from the Rehabilitation Center and a few of Jameson's trusted business associates. The atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and genuine connection. As dinner concluded, Jameson stood and tapped his glass for attention. "I want to share something. Most of you know my story, how I went from paralyzed to walking with Caroline's help. What you might not know is that this journey gave me something beyond mobility. It gave me family." He looked at Carolyn, his expression open and sincere. "For years, I equated trust with weakness. Trevor's betrayal convinced me that opening my heart would only invite pain. But Caroline taught me that walls don't protect us. They imprison us. Trust isn't naive. It's brave. Love isn't a weakness. It's the greatest strength we possess. Caroline's eyes widened as Jameson reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. He moved to stand beside her chair, going down on one knee with a grace that would have been impossible 2 years earlier. Caroline Brooks, you promised to help me walk again. You delivered on that promise, and so much more. Now I want to make a promise to you. To walk beside you for the rest of our lives, to be the partner you deserve, to love you and Mia with everything I have. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. Will you marry me? The room held its collective breath. Mia grabbed her mother's hand, squeezing tight with excitement. Caroline looked at this man who had transformed from bitter recluse to passionate advocate for healing. She saw not his wealth or status, but his courage, his kindness, and the way he looked at her daughter with genuine affection. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, absolutely yes. As Jameson slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to embrace her, the room erupted in applause and cheers. Mia threw her arms around both of them, creating a 3-person hug that felt like the most natural thing in the world. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Brooks Rehabilitation Center had expanded to 3 locations across the country. Hundreds of patients had walked through its doors seeking help with conditions that traditional medicine couldn't explain or treat. The success rate was remarkable, not because Carolyn and her team worked miracles, but because they addressed the whole person. Understanding that body and mind cannot be separated, Jameson remained actively involved in the center's operations while also transforming his technology company's focus. They now develop systems to help rehabilitation facilities coordinate care, track patient progress, and share research findings. The work felt meaningful in ways profit alone never had. He and Caroline had married in a quiet ceremony at the rehabilitation center's garden, surrounded by family, friends, and several patients whose lives had been changed by their work. Mia served as maid of honor, her speech bringing equal parts laughter and tears. On a warm Saturday morning, Jameson found Caroline in her office at the center, reviewing case files. He leaned against the doorframe, simply watching her work. She looked up, caught his gaze, and smiled.
Remember when you told me you could help me walk again?
Jameson said, entering the office. I remember you laughing at me, Caroline replied with mock sternness. I was an idiot, he admitted, pulling her up from her chair and into his arms. You promised to help me walk, but you did something better. You taught me how to live. They stood together in comfortable silence, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. Through the window, they could see Mia in the courtyard, patiently encouraging a young patient attempting his first assisted steps. She had inherited her mother's gift for seeing potential where others saw impossibility. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't spoken to you that night? Carolyn mused. Jameson considered the question. I'd probably still be in that chair, bitter and alone, convinced that my story was finished. Instead, I'm standing here with you, building something that matters, helping others find their way back to themselves. We found our way to each other, Caroline corrected. Everything else grew from that, as they watched Mia successfully guide her young patient through 3 shaky steps. Both Carolyn and Jameson felt the weight of gratitude for unexpected promises, for second chances, and for the transformative power of believing in someone when they've forgotten how to believe in themselves. The journey from paralysis to walking had been remarkable. But the journey from isolation to love, from despair to purpose, from brokenness to wholeness was the true miracle. Not because it defied medical science, but because it proved that human connection, compassion, and courage could heal wounds deeper than any physical injury. Jameson Reed had learned to walk again, but more importantly, he had learned to live. And in doing so, he had helped create a place where others could do the same. One step, one breath, one promise at a time. The end of their story was really just the beginning. Written not in headlines or medical journals, but in the quiet triumphs of every person who walked through the center's doors believing recovery was impossible, only to discover that healing had been waiting for them all along. The legacy continues 7 years after that fateful night at the Fairmont Hotel. The Brooks Rehabilitation Center had become a beacon of hope, recognized internationally. Medical schools incorporated Caroline's holistic approach into their curricula. Research papers documented the center's methods and outcomes. Insurance companies, initially skeptical, began covering psychogenic paralysis treatment after seeing the documented success rates. But for Jameson and Caroline, the true measure of success wasn't found in statistics or accolades. It was found in moments like this one. A familiar face returns on a crisp autumn morning. Jameson was reviewing quarterly reports in his home office when his assistant called, "Sir, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important." His name is Trevor Ashford. Jameson's hand froze on his coffee cup. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. 7 years had passed since Trevor's betrayal. 7 years since that conversation on the balcony that changed everything. He had thought about this moment countless times, imagined what he would say, how he would feel. "Sir," his assistant prompted. "Should I send him away?" Jameson took a deep breath, and in that moment, he realized something profound. The old rage, the consuming bitterness that had paralyzed him more completely than any physical injury, was gone. In its place was something calmer. Not forgiveness exactly, but a detachment born of hard-won peace. "Send him in," Jameson said quietly, "but stay nearby." Trevor Ashford entered the office looking nothing like the confident, polished businessman Jameson remembered. His expensive suit hung loosely on a frame that had lost considerable weight. His face was haggard, marked by lines of stress and what appeared to be genuine remorse. He stopped just inside the doorway, as if afraid to come closer. "Jameson," he said, his voice hoarse, "thank you for seeing me. I wasn't sure you would." Jameson gestured to a chair but didn't stand. "You have 5 minutes." Trevor sat, his hands twisting together nervously. "I saw the press conference. When you walked onto that stage, I followed the rehabilitation center's progress. Everything you've built. I wanted to reach out so many times, but I didn't think I had the right." "You don't," Jameson said flatly. "So why are you here now?" "Because I'm dying." Trevor's words fell heavy in the quiet room. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me maybe 6 months. And I realized I couldn't leave this world without trying to make amends. I know I can't undo what I did. I know sorry isn't enough, but I needed to say it anyway." Jameson studied the man who had once been his closest friend, searching his face for signs of manipulation or deception. All he saw was genuine fear and regret. "What happened to the money?" "The millions you stole?" "Gone," Trevor admitted. "Most of it. I made bad investments, trusted the wrong people. Turns out karma is real, and I got exactly what I deserved. I lost everything, including my self-respect. I've spent the last 3 years in therapy trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I threw away the best friendship I ever had for money that didn't even make me happy." "And what did you learn?" Jameson asked, surprising himself with his genuine curiosity. Trevor was quiet for a long moment. "That I was terrified of never being enough. My father always compared me to more successful men. Nothing I achieved satisfied him. When that buyout offer came, I saw it as proof of my worth. But I was so focused on winning his approval that I destroyed the one relationship where I was already enough, just as I was. You never judged me, Jameson. You believed in me before I believed in myself, and I repaid that by betraying you in the worst possible way." The choice to heal Jameson felt a familiar tightness in his chest, but it wasn't anger anymore. It was sadness for the friendship they'd lost, for the man Trevor could have been. "You stood on that balcony and watched me fall. You whispered that my paralysis was karma. Do you remember that?" Every day, Trevor's voice broke. "Every single day. That moment haunts me. I was cruel because I was scared. Scared you'd expose me. Scared I'd lose everything. So I lashed out in the most vicious way possible. There's no justification for it. No excuse. You're right. There isn't." Jameson stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. His movements were fluid now, natural. No trace remained of the man who spent 3 years in a wheelchair. Do you know what your betrayal did to me? Beyond the obvious, it paralyzed you, Trevor said quietly. It taught me that I had given my trust to Isley, Jameson continued. That I had built my identity around our partnership, our friendship. When you destroyed that, I didn't know who I was anymore. My body shut down because my sense of self had been shattered so completely that I couldn't function. I spent 3 years convinced I was broken beyond repair. He turned to face Trevor. But then something unexpected happened. A woman I barely knew promised to help me walk again. And in the process of keeping that promise, she taught me that healing isn't about returning to who you were before the trauma. It's about becoming someone new, someone stronger. I'm glad you found that, Trevor said, tears streaming down his face. You deserved it. You always deserved better than what I gave you. Jameson returned to his desk and sat, regarding Trevor with an expression that held no malice, only weary understanding. I'm not going to tell you that I forgive you, because I'm not sure forgiveness is mine to give. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed yourself, your values, everything you claimed to believe in. The person you hurt most was you. I know, Trevor whispered. But I will tell you this. Carrying hatred for you was poisoning me more than your actions ever could. So I let it go. Not for you, but for me. For the life I wanted to build with people who genuinely care about me. Jameson paused. The Rehabilitation Center has a palliative care program. We help people facing terminal diagnoses, work through trauma, and find peace. If you're interested, I can arrange for you to speak with someone.